just to say, okay, so that's just kicked off. So, just to say, I'm delighted to introduce tonight Caroline Crowley and Sarah Prosser. Now, my computer won't work and it won't go forwards where I had written little notes. Sorry, hang on a second. Sorry about this. Um, my computer has just decided to seize up. Um, anyway, listen, I can just introduce you. Caroline would be well known to many of you. She is a researcher, a person who's involved in a number of areas. She has a background in zoology and geography, her original studies, but she has moved more into the area of researching into people, into the environment, into nature, and how these interact, and particularly around care, how we care for each other, how we care for the environment, how we care for our communities, and how these various elements interpose. And she asks the question, who values the carer, or what value do we as a society put in the carer? So Carolyn will have some introductory slides for us at the outset, and then we'll move to Sarah. And Sarah Prosser is originally from Scotland. She works in the whole area of bioregioning. She is a weaver, and she weaves these natural and social and financial elements of our societies. And Sarah has worked in a number of fields in community development. She has worked in film, in cooperatives, and I think she worked originally as a geologist. She worked in Norway. She's worked and she's now based in the south of Ireland in Waterford, and where she runs the Bioregioning Southeast. And I'm delighted now to hand you over to our two speakers tonight who will work together to tell us all about weaving and bioregioning. Thanks very much. So I'll just hand over to you now, please, Caroline.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deirdre. And Sarah is going to start sharing the slides. Hello, everybody. Delighted to be here with you tonight. And I'm talking to you from the Riverlea catchment in Cork City. And I won't even talk to you about the weather advisory we've gotten here. We know that up the country, you've been experiencing it for even longer than we have. Thank you very much, Deirdre, for your warm welcome, and thank you to the Irish Uplands Forum for inviting myself and Sarah, especially Sarah, to speak tonight. I'm going to be speaking very little. I'm going to open the presentation with a brief look at the geography of the uplands and of river catchments in Ireland. And then I'm going to hand over to Sarah, and Sarah's going to take us on the journey to bioregions, which I know is why we're all here tonight. So in terms of just setting the scene with a little bit of geography, we're all very familiar with the geography of our 32 counties across the island of Ireland. These are political and administrative units. And the map on the right shows the geography, the distribution of the uplands on the island of Ireland. So any spot in orange and brown are areas that are 200 meters or higher above sea level. And this map is from the Irish Uplands Forum website. So when you look at the geography of counties, which are very familiar to all of us, we can immediately say what county we live in, but sometimes we may not always be able to say immediately what river catchment we live in or what our closest upland area is. But you can see, looking at the uplands, how the county boundaries, the relationship between uplands and county boundaries it's not a natural one. You look at County Wicklow in the east, and there's a lot of brown and orange denoting uplands in County Wicklow. Then you go to places like Longford and Westmeath. There doesn't seem to be any uplands in those counties. You go down to County Cork, and you see that the county lines are bisecting and fragmenting uplands in that part of the country. So there's not a natural relationship there. So if we move on to the next slide and start to look at, we're going to start sensing river catchments. So I just want to shift a little bit from uplands to river catchments. And river catchments are natural landscape units. And this first map it's the county boundaries again, but we've overlaying river catchments under those county boundaries. So again, you don't get a sense of a relationship. So if we bring in the middle slide, yeah, thank you. We've started to fade out the county lines and allowing the river catchment geography to start to come through a little bit further. There's still a lot of, it's still quite busy. And if we bring in the third map, here we just focus on the river catchment. So what we are literally doing is we've peeled back the political and administrative units of county boundaries, and it's revealing this geography of river catchments, which looks quite different for the most part. And this is a really good base map for us to have in our minds for this conversation tonight. So moving on then to the next slide. So we're going to bring in the uplands now that we spoke about in the initial slide, and we want to talk about where the uplands and the lowlands are connected, because those are the river catchments. So our first map is again just showing the uplands in terms of the county boundaries. We're starting in the middle map to fade out those county boundaries again, just peeling it back, bringing in the river catchments. And in our third map, now we've really brought the river catchment geography to the fore and left the brown and orange of the uplands layer sitting on it. And compared to the map on the left, which is uplands and county boundaries, now you can see uplands in a relationship with river catchments, and there seems to be an interesting story there. So in my next slide, going into what that story might be, here is on the left a graphic of a river catchment. And basically a river catchment, we can kind of understand it as a landscape that acts as a natural collector of rain and snow melts, not so much snow in this country, which along with groundwater, it all flows downhill towards a common outlet like the sea. So if we just tap once more and bring up the little circle on the graphic, so one way of thinking about the uplands is thinking about them as this distinct landscape that's over 150 meters or 200 meters above sea level. And that really helps to focus our attention on the uplands and what's happening up there, places where farming and forestry and outdoor recreation are really, important activities. And the photo on the right is of Cumshingon Lake in the Cumra Uplands from Sarah. So really highlighting a very unique kind of distinctive kind of landscape. And if we go on to the next slide, and one more little tap to say the river catchments way of thinking and lens invites us to really think about the uplands in relationship with the rest of the river catchment, with those lowlands that are downstream where the water from the uplands is flowing and where a lot of us tend to live. I'm in Cork City, very close to the estuary where the River Lee, that headwaters in towards the way out west of the city. All of that water is being received and concentrated as it moves closer to where I am. But in the city, I'm not thinking about the headwaters of the River Lee. I can't see them. I don't know about them. I don't spend much time in them. So I don't sense that relationship. But maybe in the lowlands, all of us who live in lowlands really need to be thinking a lot more about the uplands and really thinking about that relationship in terms of the river catchments. And in the photo on the right, we now see Cumshingon Lake in the Cumra Uplands, and we see the lowlands beyond. And this is really an invitation for us to really start thinking about that really interesting river catchment geography where the lowlands and the uplands start to make sense. And there's a really interesting story there, and we're part of that story. So I'm going to hand over now to Sarah, who's going to bring us on that journey into bioregions. And and I might come back a little later on at the end of Sarah's presentation.
Thank you very much. So that was, a lovely introduction, and it's obviously not new, people connecting uplands through rivers to coast. And one point of reference is Patrick Geddes. He was a Scottish man who lived in the 1890s through to the sort of early 1900s. And he did this valley section where he really wanted to get planning people to stop doing abstract planning and saying, look, that the mountains and the valleys and the coast are all connected. He called them the valley section. But why he really did it was because he was just exasperated that these planners weren't thinking about the region and the ecology and the livelihoods that vary in each of these. And I think it's that bringing in the livelihoods that relate to the particular the context that brings it from just thinking about a single catchment to thinking about what does this mean in terms of really regenerative, really sustainable landscapes going into the future. And that's really sort of very similar to how Common Land, who's a Dutch NGO who have been working with large-scale holistic landscape restoration methods for the last over 10 years now. And they've been looking at, what characterizes how we can really sort of, what are the frameworks that we can work within to really bring about regenerative, sustainable futures. And you can see that the modern equivalent of these catchment-based ways is to look at what they call the 3 zones. So you've got the natural zone up in the highlands or in the uplands where you might be restoring and protecting biodiversity with your natural ecosystems. You have a combined zone further down where you might have food and fiber productivity. And then you might have cities and economic zones where you're going to have more economic productivity, but within the whole, you're going to be having a balanced system. And this 3 zones approach of Common Land is just one part of a bigger framework that they look at to say, how could we restore whole big landscapes? So you can see there in that column here, it's called landscapes, you can see those 3 zones. And the thought is that, or the realization that it's going to take at least 20 years, probably more generations, but at least 20 years to be able to go into a landscape and really work with all the different holistic, different ways of looking at it to bring back restoration. And to do so, it brings in this other concept, this one of the 4 returns. And that's really saying that, if we're looking at any part of this catchment, we're going to not only need to bring in nature, we're not only going to have to bring back nature, we're also going to have to bring back the social returns, the jobs, the businesses, the meaningful social prosperity that we need to have thriving communities. And we need to have financial flows coming there. We need to not just have project-based injections of funding. We need to have those too, but we also need to have sustainable ways of generating financial returns. And most importantly, we need to have people that are inspired and motivated to work with that. So we have to somehow give people the imagination, the connection, the relationships, both to the nature and to landscape, to say, how could we be inspired to work in this way of thinking? So Common Land and Ashoka were 2 organizations that got together and said, this might be something that we could start doing in Europe. Common Land had been working in South Africa, Australia, South Africa, the Netherlands. And 3 or 4 years ago, got together and said, what about thinking about this in Irish case, in the Irish sense? Mick Kelly from Waterford at GIY was part of that initial conversation, as was Brendan Dunford over from the Burren. And the word that then comes up is bioregioning. This is really saying that, we've got those landscapes and that landscape approach, but what are the natural units to start working with? And I'm just going to read some of the definitions of what bioregions are. I mean, bioregion means biocultural. It means a life region. And it's really got a saying that there's a connecting story that starts really in deep geological time and shows up through the landscape. So we've got high uplands because they're harder geological rocks. And then from that, the soil. And then from that, different agricultural processes and things. That means that we also have a cultural relationship directly through that story. And if you can see where the natural boundaries of that bioregion are, and then you can look at it and look into it, you can see loads of different ecosystems and human systems really living within it. And all of those systems, whether they're freshwater or biodiversity or transport or health, they're all connected. And I think this understanding of connectivity is something that's really getting more respected in the whole drive for sustainable and regenerative futures. So a bioregion then invites us to inhabit that place in a way that's full of relationship. And that means that, you don't just work by yourself or with one or two others. You have a relationship to that landscape, to that bioregion, to the nature within it, but also with each other. This is something about a collective movement, and we're looking for the relationships between the different projects rather than just having lots of isolated projects around the place. Another definition is that bioregioning is a sort of watershed-oriented view of a lot of things. So you look at the watersheds and you ask, how does governance and finance and politics, how can they all be more coupled to that upstream, downstream framework? And is it then the right scale and size to honour the living systems to really deliver the really ambitious financed social and environment strategies? So things like the nature restoration law, like the biodiversity action plan, they need to somehow connect to a scale of deliverable implementation. And some projects are too small and some are too large. And is the bioregion just the right size to be able to say, here's a container where we can think different, we can connect everybody together through these relational ways and actually join up to make sure that these big, ambitious strategies can be delivered in a way that makes sense. So this sort of shows that why we have to work in these contextual watershed kind of ways, because the difference between the Southeast and anywhere on the West Coast or the Northwest would be very different if this is just an example of river nitrate quality. And you can see immediately that, to come with one national strategy that said, we'll all do the same thing, or to say, because there's so much more activity happening around the borough and therefore they're going to get a lot more nature-oriented stuff, whereas in fact the major problems are down the Southeast in this case, then you start being able to design and plan according to context. And this is just environment. I mean, on top of the environment, you have to start layering all the social and cultural layers and senses of belonging and all the. We're not saying that the county is still incredibly important, as is the GAA club, as is the townland, as is everything else. But this is the scale that nature would define, and therefore it makes sense to work at this level. So how do we work? We go into these natural units, and this is the sort of natural unit that we started calling the Southeast Bioregion. As you can see, it's quite big. It's not just one watershed. It's several nested watersheds. And this is the scale at which we think you can still have relationships between different people doing really good stuff within that. And we can build up those relationships and still have an ambitious plan for how much financial livelihoods we could also bring in to make this kind of change. I can come back to why the scale, if that's a question we want to discuss later. But how we work, we go and we go out and we meet individuals, and this is Don O'Sheehan doing his EIP Bride project. So there's lots of brilliant projects going on out there. But what we can do is bring people into the same room and they meet each other and have common visioning processes. We can talk about what kind of systems we want to see happen in the areas. And we can start saying, if we listen to the landscape and listen to the people, what kind of projects are they saying would make the difference as a whole to this bioregion? So from that, we develop what we call our portfolio of concepts. There are so many things happening within this bioregion that are all context specific to this bioregion, and how can we support them? So an example is, this is John Murphy's farm. It's over in the Bride Valley over here. And John had given up dairy farming, but wanted to do something else that was more related to people and nature, but he didn't really know what. And it wasn't before he came into the networks in the bioregion that return of inspiration came to be able to imagine what this farm could be. So he was surrounded by a group of people saying, go for it, go for it. And we could give a little bit of money that was just enough to say, do it, And from that, our farm at Bushy Park has grown and is now a really thriving model of people co-owning. They're going to be co-owners, shareholders in this farm. And then this is Roger Ahern, who is the employed farmer who will come in and help design at the growing season. And then it's up to the families to come and contribute a little bit, but not so much. And this is a financially sustainable model that we've been inspired from the Netherlands. But the idea is that it's both financially, socially, inspirationally, and giving back on nature. It's not just one, it's all four. And then this is a model that can be replicated around the bioregion. Another example is just 2 weeks ago. We got the people that we've been working with from the Grain Network, people like Sarah Richards from Seagull Bakery, people from the meat ecosystem like Siobhan Hubbard from Slievna Farmer, people from the horticulture like our farm that we've just seen, and from the dairy sector, so people like Don O'Shean. Now, each of these have been working to bring back regenerative and holistic ways of working, and often in co-ops and networks that want to work in this way. And we can bring them into the same room, and we can work as a curator to bring them together and say, how could we bring together new cooperatives, new co-owned things, and inspire each other? And it was amazing watching the networks develop of each of these 4 different things to say, oh, we all actually want a hub. We all actually want to co-own. We all want to be able to exchange knowledge on the same sort of things. And if we could all layer this within the bioregion, we would have an incredibly robust food system. So we can all inspire each other and keep going. When it comes to the uplands, I just want to bring 2 examples. This was an example of a nature corridor that we've been trying to initiate based on inspiration from Wheeled to Waves in the UK. We can imagine, like, if you look over on the left here, these are little patches of land that people in Sussex have said, I pledge to do an action for nature on my particular patch of land. And as they pledge and as they get support as to what that action might be, you build up this nature corridor. So we've put in an application and we're waiting to see if it'll get through, called From Coombe to Coast. And this would be the first trial part of it along this. This is the part of the Blackwater River coming through here. And this would go from the uplands all the way down to the coast. And the idea would be trying to get people to say, I'll pledge to do something, I'll pledge to do something. And then the vision would be that one day we'll have this huge, great corridor, massive one, not just a little thin strip of a hedge, but a really broad one that could actually one day become an investment object for the people that want to really invest big amounts of money that wouldn't go to individuals, but would go to a collective investment platform that could bring in new income, as well as the biodiversity, as well as the connection between these different patches. Otherwise, up in the uplands, we've been working with this example here. This slide came from Owen Carton, but we've been looking at all the different ways of bringing back sustainable futures and livelihoods in the uplands. We've had various succession workshops, generational renewal ideas, looking at the possibility for when wool and everything makes sense again. And then we stay in touch with people like Peter and Nikita up in Terra Nu. They moved in 3.5 years ago, and I think they're here on the call. So if anybody wants to ask them anything, I'm sure they'd be welcome to expand. But just within 3.5 years, they've taken one of the most upland farms and are gradually turning it into testing different ways of making a sustainable livelihoods happen up in the top part of this this catchment, but also then connecting through invasive species and other trails initiatives, looking further down the valley, and eventually trying to join everything down. So this just to summarize, really, this is a diagram that summarizes our model. You can see all these blue dots, all the different kind of initiatives, we call them concepts, that we've seen emerging in the landscape. And they're all connected, they're all entangled. And to suggest that you can go and support a nature corridor without thinking about the food that could come out of it, or the land ownership within it, or the sustainable uplands from it, or the new kind of farming, or the social capital of the third age, which is another concept. These are all entangled things going on in that landscape at the same time. So what we can do is support that. How can we support? We can support through making maps like the catchment one you saw now. We can support by trying to bring in new kinds of finance. And we can support by doing a lot of learning opportunities and curating of multi-stakeholder groups and bringing people together so that they can exchange knowledge. So I just want to touch on the finance a little bit. What we kind of offer are, because we're funded through philanthropy, we have 3 main philanthropic funders at the moment that mean that we can, this is them meeting the upland farmers when they came on a common land trip about a year and a half ago. So these were some of the big funders who were saying we're looking to fund these holistic ways of thinking, these joined up ways of thinking. And at the moment, what we've been able to do is give out what we call catalyst grants, which is just €1,000 to just go and try. And then if it's looking good, we've been able to give out a few what we call just do it grants. Just go do it. And that's what made our farm at Bushy Park, for example, start. We're also now able to offer a couple of bioregional basic incomes and bioregional basic infrastructure grants. And those mean that we can actually start seeing what difference would it make. Like, we know about the artist basic income, but what would I mean if other change makers, other pioneers actually could calm down and be less stressed and stop trying to do 5 jobs and actually have that basic income. So we gave out the first bioregional basic income to Roger Ahern. I'll show you in the next picture. And that's a really exciting innovation that we can try, and then we can say, look, it made this much difference. Let's see what else if we can start attracting more finance that would also invest in that kind of future. Bioregional basic infrastructure is basically saying there's missing parts in the infrastructure that are missing that if we filled them would unleash the ability for other people to set up livelihoods within that landscape. So it could be within the meat, the grain, the dairy product. Is there those networks I was talking about before? Is there something missing that would unleash the ability to live and make impact in that infrastructure? We want to start doing more what we call matching funds and revolving funds. At the moment, we don't have enough funds flowing in, but as we've gradually building up the examples, that's where we're going, and I'll show you that in a minute. I say we do philanthropic. We're funded by philanthropists. We have one Irish, one. So Life's Too Good. We have Common Land funding us from the Netherlands, and we have the Novo Foundation from the States, who are now called Regional Futures. But we've also had grants through Climate Kick and the department, through the Geological Survey, through LawPro. So there's other projects that we do as well. But because we're here for 20 years, we're not a project, we can gather that knowledge and start stacking it up on top of each other. We're here for as long as it takes. Here are the 2 examples of the BBIs, as we call them. The first, bioregional basic infrastructure, bought a van. This is a chilled van that can now go out and pick up the meat and take it to the abattoir and the meat processing and bring it back to small farmers around. This is now parked at Newbard Farm, which is Siobhan Hubbard's and Ross is their farm up in Knockmeal Downs, in Uplands up there. And then this is Roger demonstrating that he supports the basic income for farmers and saying what a difference is going to make to him for the next 3 years. The other kind of money we can bring in is by taking on some of the horrible parts of writing applications that our partners might want to be part of and don't have the capacity to write the proposals. I put this one up because this is one with the Irish Uplands Forum that's now got through to stage 2 of the latest Horizon call. It's a 2-stage one, so we're now in stage 2, and it's about innovative approaches to intangible cultural heritage for societal resilience. And we're doing something called the Rural Commons. So it's with 5 other countries, and it's about the safeguarding the intangible cultural heritage, but within driving as a part of driving agroecological transitions and setting up living labs. And this will be layered upon another one that we've just secured for agroecological transitions and community-driven agroecological transitions. So they're very complementary. This is bringing in the cultural side of it. We also have a postdoc based at SE2U looking at the 4 returns. So there's other ways of bringing in grants and partnerships into this one bioregion. And what we do is we're working with Common Land as well on their financial assessment, saying that basically, if you look at this graph down here, within 5 years, we reckon, once you look at all the concepts, all the pilots and the interventions that are going on, we're actually looking at these are the kind of numbers that we'd love to see being able to flow into the region. If you had 12 million euros, for example, you could be funding all of these concepts that we have that together, entangled, could drive a big transition. Now, some of that finance might be catalytic and philanthropic, but in the long term, you're looking for new kind of investment, new kind of partnerships, and sustainable business models. So we divided up into how much grant would we need, how much is actually going to be commercially generating new finance and new jobs within the bioregion. So just to finish off, this is our timeline. We started off in 2019. That was when Mick and Brendan went over and met the other groups with Common Land and Ashoka. And I started weaving in 2022, and then we spun out into our own independent non-profit. So now we are a non-profit CLG called the Bioregional Weaving Alliance. So we're actually set up to work all over Ireland, but at the moment we've been concentrating very much in the southeast. We're working from taking more and more ideas to actions and building up that solid support platform. So we're now, from me starting back here, we've now got a regenerative business developer, Keely O'Brien, and a half post of an impact harvester who goes around and tries to look out for, that's Meg Tarr, she looks for where is the impact and tries to harvest it to show that some of it's storytelling, some of it's surprising expressions, but it's all happening out there. And how can we put it into the 4 returns and show the aggregation of all the impact that's being made? But the idea is that we stick around and we build up that platform, and we hope that within 20 years we'll be able to really look at new flows of finance coming in, maybe through the nature of corridor, maybe through other ways of investment, and see if we can really transition to more regenerative, entangled, related kind of ways. So is Ireland somewhere that we could actually say it could be an island of bioregions? Could we have each of these sort of containers being a place where systemic investment portfolios could be presented? And could we say that we'll all be able to work with common intent and drive in each of these kind of regions? And would that make a lot more sense than trying to do it through the political boundaries that exist at the moment? Though, of course, they'll still be there as part of the partnership. Would it be these kind of containers that will give us the freedom of our mindsets to be able to think differently, to connect differently, build new relationships outside of the competitive, extractive ways that are so dominant in our societies today, and actually give us the freedom to start building new co-ops, new resilience, new joined up ways of thinking right from the top to the bottom of each catchment. So I think that's my last slide. Shall I just escape from there and see if you're still there? Because I can't see you. You are. Still some people. And I think from that, Caroline was going to react. But
yeah, I'll give a very brief reaction because I can see we've got an amazing group of an amazing audience here that, you know, will have an awful lot to ask you, Sarah. So I don't want to hog the field. I'm going to give a very brief reflection, and just to say I've been following the work of Bioregioning Southeast Ireland for a few years. I first heard Sarah speak at the Landscape Alliance Ireland conference in Waterford a few years ago, and immediately once I heard Sarah describing the kind of work going on, it just made sense to me. I think internally I was saying yes. I was so happy to hear that this work was happening in Ireland. It's so holistic in terms of the way it works with people in partnership and collaboration and really creates the environment for that to happen. It's so holistic in terms of how it thinks about weaving together the social, the natural, the financial, the inspiration, bringing in culture, local knowledge of place, all of that being woven together and respected and cared for. And I do find this a very caring approach. And I listened to the webinar where Roger Ahern was talking about the bioregional basic income that he was now receiving as the head grower on Bushy Park, our farm. And just to hear from a very passionate grower who, you know, typically would have to work multiple jobs and not have time to kind of, you know, rest himself and get himself geared up for the growing season, because he was always having to work in many different places just for a livelihood. And now through that basic income, how it has freed Roger up and it's supporting him, and the amount of work he's done already and how he's linking in through the farm, he's linking in with the local school children, and you could see that photograph of Roger and the children around him. he is so supported by this very pragmatic action that's happening through bioregioning. And then to hear tonight, Sarah, every time I hear Sarah talk, I'm kind of learning more and more about how this is working and unfolding. And it's such an evolving process. To hear about this sense of, you know, buying the van as part of the resilient food futures, as part of the connective tissue, just to enable the linkages that people need on the ground. We're really hearing how needs and people are being listened to and responded to and supported. And it's just so encouraging at this time. So I'm going to kind of leave my reflection there. I don't know if you want to say anything else, Sarah, or if we'll open it up to everybody here.
I'm more than happy to open it up. I mean, a point of clarity is that the BBI, the basic income that Roger got, is actually separate from the farm. The farm has its own financial sustainability model. We had different people apply for the first bioregional basic income, and Roger got it, but it's slightly separate from the actual farm. It does enable him to then work less, not feeling he's spending too many hours down at the farm, and he should be doing other things to earn money. And this, so it's given him, but it's unconditional on the basic income model is that you get it unconditionally, so it's not related to working on the farm. But he does. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both very much. That was, wow, a tour de force, I think, on a really holistic approach to from the source to the sea, how we can all work more sustainably and more resilient, with resilience, I guess, for what's happening. Particularly, I guess, in the last couple of weeks where we've seen what's happening with climate, with rainfall, with the impacts on communities, the impacts on farming. And I think everything you've said makes so much sense, really. I'm going to throw it over to the floor.
Can I just comment on that,
Yeah.
Deirdre? Because I think it's a really good point. And I think, when we often see what's happening with natural capital discussions at the moment, you see, for example, discussions on peatland finance. Now, where are the peatlands? Are they in our upland? Are they at the top of our catchments? Should that capital and that investment model be connected to a catchment downstream, so that we could actually be thinking, if they're getting that kind of investment, we could be bringing it in as a relational way to say, be aware that that's what's happening. I just think it's as these floods happen, and we could be thinking about land use and land designation in the future, where we invest and where we choose to invest upstream rather than always in the cities. It might be just to expand our understanding of entangled impact would be really beneficial, I think, for us all to be part of that system.
I guess when people are in, the sort of panic with water flowing into people's homes, the first reaction is we need to engineer a solution here in river channels. But I mean, that doesn't work. It just pushes the problem downstream, and it's doing nothing to manage the problem back upstream, as you say, where most of the, the natural regeneration, the natural solutions to these issues could be expanded. And anyway, look, we could talk all night about flooding, so I'm not going to go down that hole particularly, but I'm going to throw it open to the floor. Would anybody like to comment or ask a question of Sarah and Caroline, or maybe Nikki and Peter?
Dougal there.
Dougal, yes, sorry, Dougal. Where you go?
Thank you, Sarah and Caroline. I was really impressed by your presentation, and it couldn't be more timely. What really stuck out for me was, and I don't know if this is uppermost in your thinking, is that it's river catchment based. And given what's gone on over the last few weeks, I think that I know that you've been getting your base purely on philanthropy at the moment, but I think that it would be a shame if this approach, that you don't, re-engage with central government in terms of seeing this as a way of solving many problems all at once. We've all heard various, agri-environmental projects, but this one, to me, seems to very much emphasize the idea of a river catchment. And And we've known that over the last 50 years, whenever we joined the EU, farmers have been incentivized to drain their land. And, should we be, as part of the solution to the flooding, be saying, well, as part of this approach, using this model, that we should be incentivizing, and it can only be funding from the Department of Agriculture to fund farmers to re-wet land that they trained 40 years ago or whatever.
Mm. Yes, I mean, I think you're very right. It is a catchment based, but I think what's unique about it is it's nested catchments, so it's like actually admitting that we're looking at a really quite a big scale, so that we can bring in the connection of relationships across nested sort of bigger area. But it is a catchment focused approach. I couldn't agree more. And I also couldn't agree more with what you're saying in terms of, I think it is holistic enough to bring together all the things that are going on. I sometimes say that, in a world that's falling apart, the bioregion is somewhere where things can fall together, and all the different initiatives could actually just stack up really well and happen in an interrelated way. And so it's a sort of conduit where you're listening to the ground and you're listening to the landscape, but we are also there as a conduit for big scale, ambitious, strategic flows of funds in. And we've tried to talk a little bit, but I think because we were quite new and the words are sort of a bit foreign sometimes, it's I think now we're beginning to show more and more what it actually looks like. And I think these first few years have been trying for us to show this is what it looks like, and this is, making the maps, making the prototypes, showing what a BBI is, has been a really important part of what we're doing. But I couldn't agree more in terms of that this could be a brilliant way of funneling a lot of the nature restoration through to actually connecting to the people, to the land. At some point, I'd like Peter to comment on this as well, but I see that Katie's got a hand up as well.
Sarah, can I just interject? Yeah. It might help if you want to, in terms of communicating this to central government, say this is community and catchment solution, yep. Because then you're emphasizing that it's community based and it's to do with river catchments. I think that, to be honest, when this talk was flagged to me, it didn't really float my boat. And I think a lot about this is to do with the branding of concepts, but also I think that, I'm just thinking from a communications point of view. That's all.
Yeah. No, you're so right. I mean, bioregion, when I first started, I was going, oh God, and now I've grown to love it. So now I use it. But I think the community catchment thing is that people quite quickly think of Law Pro and the river trusts, and they're doing brilliant work. And it's just how to sort of distinguish it a little bit from that sort of like the focus on livelihoods and bringing back all four returns. So we just we could put community catchment, and maybe we could get an external advisory panel on how we should communicate this, because we need some advice. So thank you for your input. Yeah.
Thank you.
Katie.
Pipe in there, if that's okay, Sarah. I just wanted to say thanks very much, because it was a really informative talk. I especially liked the map of the catchment, I suppose, delineation. It's kind of eye-opening, because it's nice to see it as a natural boundary as opposed to, I suppose, a man-made boundary. But I would really like to, mostly I'm just commenting because I really like to maybe get in contact with you in future, because I'm doing a PhD on sustainable upland transitions, land use transitions. And this is kind of my key thinking, because I'm like, how can we get anywhere if we can't keep everyone happy? How can we reach this level of how can we be ecologically sound, environmentally sound, while supporting people's income and that sort of thing? So that seems to be what you're doing, that down your neck of the woods. So I would very much like to kind of get in touch with you in future, if that's okay.
Of course. Where are you based, can I ask?
Mayo, but I'm in ATU Galway.
Yep. Of course, you're welcome. You're welcome. I was up in Galway a month or two ago. We were looking at the Corrib catchment and whether there was a bioregion around the Galway Bay. that would be a
Yeah.
natural way of organising around there. And also Martina Flynn has done work from Slivochty and coming in from that side as well, and the Cumbio people, and so we have initial conversations going on up there. I think it would be, I mean, they've come so far, they've done so much good work up there already. It'd be really lovely to bring it all together into a bioregion and say, look,
and if we could use some of this input for other projects as well, it would be fantastic, because everyone seems to be on the same narrative now of we need to all work together to reach all these multiple goals and objectives, you know. But yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Katie. Anybody else got a comment or question? Or
go, Peter, have a comment. Have a comment, Peter.
Yeah, Peter, or would you have anything to offer from a practical perspective, since you're doing this?
I do have to say that Peter also works for Common Land. He has this double role.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. You're very welcome tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre, and it's nice to meet you and everyone else here. And it's been a pleasure attending the webinar. I do often have a double role, supporting from the background, and I think one thing that I would maybe add is that the bioregion is a beautiful container, for in terms of sort of like, okay, where are we focusing? But it really comes down also to people taking initiative. And it's been a question of mine for 2 decades, like how do people move from idea to action? And if you get like so many people, walk around with good ideas about how the landscape could be different or their farm could be different, but how could they actually then turn that into action is a really big step. And often there's so many things in the way of actually making it possible. Sometimes they're structural, such as finance. Sometimes they're their mindsets in terms of, it could be like I could be telling myself a story that I'm not able to do this, or that my farm would not be profitable, and so on. So I think there's something also about cultivating a particular type of, I don't know if it's a conversation. I see it very much in some of the workshops that Sarah and I have facilitated here in the bioregion around, there's all these good ideas in the space, but then who actually grabs one of them and just does it? And I think with Bushy Park, our farm at Bushy Park is an example of eventually it just takes someone to say, okay, right, let's just do it. I think I'm really struck by, like, you can convene people into a space and you can bring a couple of people together and do things together, or like have dialogue together and create ideas, and get to the point of actually then committing to them and actually doing them. Having witnessed that here in the bioregion is beautiful, and I wanted to bring in that way of that's not random. You can design for that. You can design sessions to lead to those kinds of shifts of, okay, let's just do it. I think we can do that more often and in more places. I think that's what I would add.
I think it's a good point. Which, I mean, it took us like a good 2 years of. I can trace it back to the first time we started talking about the header-borne model that inspired our farm. The first conversations, the first ideas and then we had a trip over there to see how it actually works, and coming back, and we did a year of trying to look at how it should replicate. And then it, like you say, it took someone within that group to say, do it. And John said, all right, I'll do it. But we had the Just Do It grant that was able to pay the capital just to get it going. So it's getting all the bits of jigsaw puzzle together. And then him not feeling alone when he was starting. It was, you're surrounded by all this support. And when the crows come and eat all the stuff, we'll all be there well, we weren't, but by then he's got his volunteers groups going, of which Meg knows more. But by, it's not alone. You're part of a group, and that circle looking after that initial phase went all the way from one side of the bioregion to the other. They weren't just based around the farm. So it's solidarity as much as anything.
Yeah, I think we've found over the years with the Irish Uplands Forum, there's nothing succeeds like success. So if you see a model in operation and you can bring other farmers or other communities to see something happening by people like themselves, it's not remote. Yeah. And that can be the most effective way to actually give people that impetus, to take that leap that you mentioned, Peter, to, just have the courage to jump when they see somebody else has jumped and that it's working. So, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I'll just add really briefly is that, for example, at our upland farm, Nikita and I, we took a jump and we planted a crop that was, barely grown in Ireland before, aronia berries. And we had our first harvest this last year, and the juice is now for sale. And being able to hand out juice to the neighbors It's beautiful to see. Like now, we have one neighbor. She's like, right, give me a couple more boxes, and where can we get these plants, and would they work on my farm, right? So it's just beautiful to see that we can try things out in the uplands, and then we can share the success, and then that can grow over time.
Lovely. The ripple effect of aronia berries.
Exactly.
Very good. That's lovely. Anybody else like to comment or add something?
Justin had a question, didn't he? Did he go?
I can't see it on my screen, but he made this. I have sort of two screens, so maybe he's kind of. I think he just dropped out. He was there for
Had his hand up. Yeah, he just left. He left. Yeah.
It must have just crashed out on him or something. Anybody else got a comment or ideas they'd like to add? If in the absence of anybody else coming forward, I'd just like to say that the Irish Uplands Forum, we recently had a sort of a networking event over in Connemara at the end of October last, and the theme of the whole event was building partnerships for nature, farming, and recreation, because access to recreation is a key part of our sort of founding principles. But really, it's all about, the whole message we got back from that was about working together, connectivity, partnerships, farmers working together, farmers learning from each other, communities working together, communities learning. So I think it sort of dovetails very nicely with the general thrust of what the Irish Uplands Forum is trying to achieve for the last 30 years.
Yep.
And for a long time, I guess we were banging our head off the wall. And so it's wonderful to see new initiatives coming forth, that where we can all link and learn and join the dots.
Yeah. And I think there is an increased understanding of how to build those partnerships and how relationships can be introduced. I think there's personally, I've been working with it for quite a long time. You see, there is a sort of mindset beginning to understand that it's not just about a transaction. It is about a long-term getting to know people and investment in that particular role, rather than that's to me why I've loved being a weaver, because you're actually employed to do that bit in between the two projects, because quite often you have two projects and they need to make a transactional agreement that will work in partnership. But as a weaver, you're just there to sort of bring people into a safe space of belonging, as it's sometimes called, and say, we can curate that and we can keep it going. It's not just one that's going to go and then disappear. It's going to be part of the ever richness and deeper connection, rather than just be a sort of project-based or a sort of piece of paper.
Very good. Unless there is another question, I'm going to bring Caroline back in. Caroline, did you have a little sort of closing thought or something for us?
I didn't, but what
you didn't. Sorry, I thought you said
what I would. Yeah, I had my closing thought, and I've been really enjoying the conversation. I do want Sarah to repeat that amazing phrase she had. I was trying to write it down as quick as you said it, Sarah. It was something like, in a world that's falling apart.
In a world that, as the world falls, there's a book, and actually it comes from a Yeats poem, doesn't it, originally, I think, actually. As the world falls apart, and in a world where everything's falling apart, the bioregion is somewhere where things can fall together.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
I wrote that down as well, actually, Sarah, when you said it. Yeah,
it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, the sort of the boring politician version is looking for political coherence, and policy coherence and all the rest of it. But it's actually much deeper than that. So it's.
Maybe I'll ask one question just before we close out. One of the things I guess is, this sounds lovely to the likes of me or people who aren't actively farming in the uplands, and where people and communities at large are facing huge challenges, the demographics of upland communities, the challenges of rainfall, of declining payments, all the problems and challenges that upland farmers have. Are you at all meeting a sort of a cynicism from people who have lived on the land or who are struggling to continue living on the land with their families? And I'm thinking particularly now of our colleague Micheál has joined us, but do you meet any sort of pushback from people who have who are struggling?
It's funny because you don't know what's said behind your back, and I'm sure there's lots of cynicism because we have very open network and people can come and go. So you see that over the 4 years, we always have open events, and some people are very keen to begin with and then disappear, and you don't know if it's cynicism or if it's like because they're just busy doing other stuff, and then it's always open. They come back again and they say, "Oh, now I'm ready to engage." So it's up to their personal journey as well at the same time as this is going on. So I guess there's some. The word bioregioning it's easy to sort of push back on as well, but I wouldn't say there's a certain amount.
Could I say so one of the things that I love working now with bioregioning is that I am just constantly moved and inspired by the farmers and the producers and the people who we work with every day. Like that's sort of that's the fuel that keeps me going in this work, is that I'm actually surprised constantly by the reaction on things that I think that farmers and people in the bioregion things that they might find that I think they're going to find sort of frustrating or disappointing. They actually find a way to turn it around and say, no, we can use this as an opportunity. So just my 2 cents there is I actually find that people are really quite inspiring in their ideas and the things that they're willing to do and take risks on. So yeah.
Okay.
And actually, some people sometimes ask me, what's been your biggest surprise since you started? And I think it's the willingness to engage in the full returns language, the willingness to say, I'll be back in the bioregion, and start using those. And we shouldn't be scared of bringing in these kind of words, because actually maybe it's the missing narrative in our stuck old system that will unleash our ability to start creating the kind of value and the kind of relationships that we want to see in the new system. So I think we shouldn't be scared of bringing in simple but really effective frameworks and words if they can unleash the way that we're thinking. So
very good.
I'll put our website in the chat and encourage you to go and listen to the manifesto, which I haven't mentioned today. But if you want a bit of stirring inspiration, do seek out the bioregioning.
Look at your website. Great. Thank you, Sarah.
Sean's got his hand up. Yeah.
Sean, were you going to say something?
Hey folks, yeah, thanks Deirdre and Caroline and Ria for organising this. Very interesting. I think the concept is brilliant. There is, any conference you go, this whole notion of community stewardship is really resonating with people.
Yep.
I think this concept fits well with lots of UNESCO and United Nations concepts as well, which is really good. And I just maybe think it's interesting that it's funded through private philanthropy. And we see private philanthropy kind of stepping forward into this space in terms of supporting innovation and supporting community-led partnerships. And as Deirdre pointed out, we really could do with government to fund more of that as well. There's this kind of bottom-up partnership approach, as the Conway Montreal Protocol said, the whole of society approach, which is objective 1 in our national biodiversity plan. But yet we see the funding for this coming through private philanthropy. So I think the government needs to be called out a bit here as well, in terms of really, putting money behind this concept and, sharing some of the resources as opposed to it being kind of driven through top-down approaches. So I think just the observation about the philanthropic investment leading out on this is really positive. It's great to see the private sector of money coming through that space, and that's encouraging, and just to give them credit for that. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think, but I think that they're very progressive philanthropists, even to be able to be that trust-based, that, they'll say, here's the money. Now we trust you. And they've been amazing in that respect. There's very little need to align ourselves with their mission. They're aligning. I mean, we do anyway, sort of thing, but there's very little of that feeling that you've got to report back on things that they're they're very sort of trust-based philanthropy, and that's great. And it is catalytic, but the ambition and that slide going with our ambition, does depend on new both private and public funds coming in if we're going to have a sort of co-created, co-financed platform to support. And this role of capital orchestrator is something that comes up in bioregioning, that you can have these hubs based in context that become the capital orchestrators to plan how funds could go out in time and space in ways that are responsive to the true needs, whether it's just a catalytic grant of 1,000 or go do it, or whatever it might be, or another BBI, or that role can be super effective. So, but Mark has got his hand up. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Sarah. A couple of comments, I suppose, and then a question. First comment is, as a recovering politician, I love the Go Do It fund because the level of cautiousness that you encounter in the civil service when you pitch any idea. I'd come back to you to say I had pitched something towards community supported agriculture, which was not a million miles away from what you guys have achieved with the basic income. And it's such a brilliant idea. And I know in my bones that 5 years from now, because your project will be a success, that there's so many obvious co-benefits to providing a universal basic income for farming and move them away from a commodification model. I know in 5 years the department will look at that and go, "Hey, that's a great idea. We should do something." But the fact that you will have de-risked it in a sense for the department, I think is really, really useful. I was wondering, and this is entirely tangential maybe, but I was wondering, have you ever looked at the legislation for the rights of the river, which has come up in the likes of, I know in New Zealand they've done it around landscape features. I think Robert McFarlane's newest book is very interesting on it as well. And it's maybe something that's too big for the bioweaving initiative to take on, but I think you'd be a very powerful part of the conversation.
We'd love to. I mean, we do talk about it. And do you remember when there was an event with, was it Clodagh somewhere? I can't remember her surname.
Cliona Kimber.
Yeah, and Grace, and they came and spoke in Waterford. That was a brilliant evening. It was really good talks about that, and we followed up for a while. But the way we work, it really depends on somebody else in the bioregion wanting to take that on as the concept, and we can support it because we just don't have the capacity at the moment to lean into that and do things like that ourselves. So we need to find the right partnerships, and we know that people like the Norvision and that are beginning to talk about those kind of things. So it would be spot on, and I think that whole sort of more than human approach as to rights as well it's exactly the kind of thing, and new economics, and there's all sorts of things that can fall together in our bioregions. But yes.
Very good, and enjoyed it this evening. I was in dark mode for a lot of it, parenting, but I was listening intently.
Double chopping. Well done, Mark. Thank you.
Pulling together. See, things you can do together at the same time as bioregioning. You can do all sorts of things, even parenting. I want to also just maybe as a leaving comment, we're at the moment, we're just beginning to design an event, which we hope to have in the first or just straight after Easter. And we'll have a gathering for bioregioning all Ireland. So people who are particularly interested in bioregioning and want to come and explore it together. We're just literally confirming dates and times and places and things. And so we at least have the save the date that will go out in the next week or 10 days. To get that. So keep an eye on our social media kind of things, and then it'd be great to see you all in person when we do that.
Great. Thanks very much, Sarah and Caroline. There were a lot of comments there of thank yous and wonderful talks from Sarah Phelan, from Shane Larkin, from I think Katie, the people who've had to leave us, they've had to leave the discussion, but generally all very positive feedback there, and thank you for very stimulating talk, and for all the comments that came in from the floor as well. I think there's so much to get your head around. And anyway, I just wanted to share before we leave the Irish Uplands Forum, the final webinar in this series, which would be number 6. So Caroline helped the Irish Uplands Forum last year, did a superb job on helping us to develop our strategic plan. And following our conference in Letterfrack in October, we also had further feedback from our members. So next month, the date might shift now, but as it stands, it's going to be on Wednesday, the 11th of March. But we want to talk about our strategic plan and just to present what we're going to do. It'll be quite a short presentation, actually, and but anybody who's interested in the Irish Uplands Forum and our work, welcome to attend. It's not confined to membership, and we'd be delighted if you'd join us. So on that note, thank you all very, very much for joining in tonight. We had a great turnout again, almost 30 people. And our particular thanks to Caroline and to Sarah for your sharing your knowledge and your ideas. And we've certainly a lot to think about, and we will look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks very much indeed, everybody.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Very much. Thanks,
Leap of
everybody.
faith. Thank you.